Kimmel shared his thoughts on a public platform, on a broadcast. And in that broadcast, there was pressure to get him removed. And now it involves the FCC, who is coming in and saying, hey, you can't fire somebody for opinion. Simultaneously, there's a lot of pressure because those FCC appointees have party affiliations and don't want certain things said on the air because they're guiding the broadcast. You can't police content that would disagree with government. America's not based on that. You can't censor everything because it doesn't agree with what the government wants. That's the problem that we're trying to create free speech for. Last week, we talked about the Charlie Kirk incident and everything that is related to that. We talked about free speech. We talked about this rise and call to leadership. And we talked about a variety of consequences when those that have an opinion and speak out publicly are criticized, condemned, or at worst, assassinated. Now, the story doesn't stop there. And this week, we have to do another piece, another podcast on this same topic, this time from a different lens. What you may have heard about, know about, or be in complete darkness about is a recent letting go, closure of Jimmy Kimmel and his live show, his broadcast. And what's come from this is a very interesting discussion, debate, and set of controversy around what it means to be silenced. We're having long dialogue today on the show. It's me and Marty Noki here. I'm your host, Aaron Velke. I'm so glad you're with us. Today, this conversation continues down the trend line of assessing what free speech means, what it means to have an opinion, and most importantly, what this new version of leadership that's kind of emerging from this rubble really looks like. And at the bottom of this conversation is a very powerful problem. And that ultimately is that we are disconnecting freedom from responsibility. We're untethering these things. We're decoupling them. And we're going to get to the bottom of this with you here and now as we assess what's really going on. Marty, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, it's good to be back. 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, another really hot set of conversations that are happening publicly.
Never ending. I would bet by next week there'll be a new one.
Well, what I see right now, I agree with you. There will be. And what I see right now is that the conversations are actually escalating, right? They're getting larger. They're getting louder. And really, in some sense, the scope is getting a little bit wider. But really, at the core of the conversation, it's the same thing that started with Kirk, and now it's just a little bit bigger. Kimmel is another example of someone with a voice, right? Some kind of loud, opinionated individual, which I don't know enough about Kimmel or the deliberate things that were said. We're not even going to talk about what was said. This is more about what's happening surrounding this and the actions that are coming from it. So if you've got opinions about Kimmel, sure, you're welcome to share them with us. You can get angry at us. At the end of the day, I want this conversation to be about something bigger. This is about almost vocality and the responsibility that comes with that, and what we're seeing as this decoupling right now.
I still think Jimmy Fallon's the funnier of all of them.
I won't tell anybody who said
that. I will tell you, it is something, this specific thing, and maybe in a larger context and different context now, is when I was teaching back years ago now, it was still one of the central things I would often speak about, especially when it came to internet, social media, where things have just kind of tend to escalate beyond what any of us can even imagine. That I'm free to do whatever I want. And at some point, who puts boundaries on this stuff? To that responsibility piece that you were speaking to. Because freedom does not mean I could do whatever I want. That's just chaos. At some point, the responsibility has to be brought in.
Correct. There has to be responsibility in what is said, in how it's said, in the consequences of saying the things. And also on the other side, which we're seeing is that if you overcorrect, you are essentially stifling a very important element of speaking itself.
You do exactly, you become what you hate. And the whole message prior, if you keep stepping back, was we got to get cancel culture. Well, you're doing exactly that now. You're becoming what you hated.
What do you mean you become what you hate? Tell me more about what you mean.
Based on what you had said there, of you kind of take the other, you become. I forget exactly how you phrase it at this point, but essentially, I'm talking ill of something for so long that I eventually become that myself. That I can't separate that, because essentially I'm just projecting it onto them anyway, how what I think and what I believe. And so for such a long time there was like cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture. But essentially when you're stifling voices, you're doing exactly that. You're doing exactly what you said shouldn't be done.
Yeah, cancel culture becomes its own inherent problem, and much of what leadership is intended to represent is a boldness, right? A stance, something solid with a larger opportunity to create solidarity where more people can get behind said leader, and that leader inherently adopts the people that are behind him, right? That there is some sense of care that is transmuted to everybody. And in that, the representation of all, like the whole collective, comes from that leader, right? That person is speaking on behalf of everyone and representing everyone. And where I think this is starting to change is that we know that takes risk, right? We know that speaking up takes a lot of confidence and bravery and courage because there's inherent risk on the backside. And our episode last week was really about, has the risk gone too far? If I speak up and I can just be shot in public, it lends any leader to be a bit more critical about whether or not they speak up, which that is problematic.
Correct. And that's the extreme. But then there's the Jimmy Kimmel who essentially did the same thing and loses his job.
Loses his job, right? The consequence, it's not as extreme as assassination, but it is certainly the extreme in the professional sense, right? You're professionally assassinated. And what I think is under duress right now is this, oh, hang on. What I think is under duress right now is, why are we unable to assess opinions without such high cost, right? Why aren't we able to articulate our opinions without such high cost? And, to look at this, I think about what is now public related to Kimmel. So here's some facts about what's going on. Kimmel shared his thoughts on a public platform on a broadcast. And in that broadcast, there was pressure to get him removed. And now it involves the FCC, who is coming in and saying, hey, you can't fire somebody for opinions. Simultaneously, there's a lot of pressure because those FCC appointees have party affiliations and don't want certain things said on the air because they're essentially guiding, we'll use that phrase, they're guiding the broadcast. Well, the plot starts to thicken because what I've learned is that the suspension, maybe it's not firing, but right now there's suspension. Kimmel's suspended. This decision is technically enabled by the broadcast business mechanics. The broadcasters have to get licenses, and those licenses can be revoked, right? They can be changed. They can be structured. So there's this pressure that the FCC is putting on broadcasters to say, hey, you can't police content that would disagree with like government. That's not what America's not based on that. Like you can't censor everything because it doesn't agree with what the government wants. That's the problem that we're trying to create free speech for.
Especially a comedian.
Right. So there's this piece about one member of the FCC seems to be intent on, this is Brendan Carr, seems to be really intent about anything that disrupts the government's narrative needs to be silenced, right? That's in the FCC. And Gomez, Anna Gomez, is saying, "Hey, wait a minute, that is not. We don't have the right to do that." And specifically, the policing and the broadcast punishment for content that the government disagrees with should not fall under our domain. That should not be us at all. And I find this fascinating because, as I read through articles, what this woman Anna Gomez seems to be calling out is that what is essentially being demonstrated publicly is that if you're in this chair, right, that Kimmel represents, but in this chair of a late night host commenting on day-to-day activities, whether comedic, whether a parody, whether a comedy, it doesn't matter what kind of format you take. If you don't comply with what narrative we want shared, we'll replace you. And her First Amendment defense is an important one, regardless of party affiliation, to be able to defend opinions, basically, different opinions.
It sounds complicated. I think what had happened is Brendan Carr, who's the head of FCC, and I heard someone talk about it this way. If he never opened his mouth yesterday and ABC and Disney decided they're dropping Kimmel, that would have been one thing. But he essentially put himself in the argument by even mentioning it yesterday that could be revoked. And that automatically changes the context of what happened there. It's their right, obviously, to drop someone or to suspend someone. But he changed the context of it by opening his mouth in the first place.
Right. He insinuated a threat to a business, and a business was like, okay, we're not going to lose business over this. We're just going to comply.
Correct. The insanity is, if you remember back in January or something like that, Target, I think, essentially said, we're not going to sell Pride stuff anymore. Their CEO has now been fired. Their business has dropped. I forget the percentage over the, like, now people recognize they have the ability to stop putting their money there in those places. And you see it a lot today towards ABC and Disney and companies like that. People are now speaking with their money as well.
Which that is, by some shape of the intent, what free speech looks like. Where I can vote with my money. I've got no issue with that. Where I find this to be very contradictory is the FCC getting involved in pushing out opinions that don't match his party affiliation, right? Because ultimately, there's an array of people that will favor one content location and stay with that content, whether it's a news channel or a newspaper or an online resource, right? And it's incredibly important that differing opinions exist in this space. This is also, we can take it out of context to companies. What's happening in macro happens in micro. The same thing happens in a company where someone's like, hey, this isn't the right way to do this. Or, hey, I disagree with how we handled this client. And if in a company, in a small team, it could be a team of 8 people. If you immediately get fired for that, the rest of the team will never speak up about a wrongdoing or some challenge.
Correct. It totally erodes trust.
It erodes trust at a foundational level. And this FCC issue is bringing to light, yes, a macro of FCC to Disney to publications to major like broadcasting. That's one thing. Thematically, though, this exists in families. This exists in friendships. This exists in business and culture. It's the same pillar. If I can't disagree with you, if I can't say no, I am not free. And that's a really fundamental piece of not just the states, but the capitalist engine, right? That I can't do it different. What the hell? That's everything that I stand for.
It's the irony of, we're talking about freedom of speech when there's no freedom. When you take away someone's right to say no, there is no freedom anymore. It's gone.
It isn't freedom. And I just think that's, I've lived through many different circumstances where once, you couldn't disagree with the leader. right? And as soon as that happens, your opinion doesn't matter. All you have to do is fall in line. And I'm not suggesting that every leader needs to open up their kimono to every person and say, hey, tell me what you think and all that. But in any sort of collective, any kind of community, if there is punishment around vocality, there is a loss of liberty.
Yeah, one, it's hard to understand how we got here in the first place. I do think social media has fed into it over time, where I could just do it. For me, it's the responsibility. It has always been there. Where's the ethics of the whole thing? And that's my philosophy background of just because I can doesn't mean I should. Right? That's kind of the crux of all ethics. And just because I can post anything online shouldn't. How we are at this point where you have no responsibility for what you put out there just blows my mind at times as human, because humans will go awry if there's no boundaries to it.
Yep.
And I feel entitled
anytime,
to. I'm entitled to do whatever I want. That's not freedom.
that the other side of this is really about responsibility, right? If Kimmel sends something that was inappropriate, then that's a conversation with his employer,
Correct.
broadcasting,
Correct.
and him, right? That I've got no issue with that.
Correct. It's a personnel issue.
It's a personnel issue, right? It's an HR issue. Like, hey, don't say that shit. And maybe it's a warning. Maybe you do get suspended. Maybe you do get fired. But to have it silenced by an outside source, that's the danger of this. And what we as leaders have to recognize is that there is a responsibility to words that we say. There is a gravity to what we are saying. And in a world where we can clip anything, that I'm not talking about what the public perception of that is. I'm speaking to those that we are in the care of, right? Those that we are responsible to and for. We have to hold that responsibility, because I can't, as a leader, just go saying whatever I want or doing whatever I want without responsibility.
And think about just on the micro level, get out of your own way, living vision. If I'm out there speaking on behalf of us, you're out there speaking on behalf of us. There is a responsibility to what comes out of your mouth. There just is, right? Because it not only impacts you, it impacts me, it impacts the business. That's the nature of it. And my background I'm glad I have the background I have in more of a mission-driven kind of world, because I always had to recognize that I'm representing something bigger than myself. That
Correct.
My words are more than just me. They're speaking on behalf of something bigger than myself. I do think that's an element that misses as well. Well, this is my opinion, and I'm allowed to have. Well, you are, but there's a consequence to that. And I think on the very micro level, you and I have a responsibility based on what we're saying if we're speaking on behalf of our company.
Yeah, there is a need for guardrails. There's a need for some restriction, and in some ways that remains the accountability of the person speaking, the leader. I believe that leaders,
or you're not a leader at that point.
Correct. And leaders love the perks of leadership. And I'm going to tell some client stories, just some patterns that I've noticed in high level, very, very successful people that disrupt this, what I'm going to say. But if you're a leader, there is a time and place for your personal opinion. There's a time and a place for your leadership opinion. And those sometimes require very delicate guardrails, but that's the price of leadership. That's the cost of it. You have to understand these things. And if you get on a public platform and you say something that is divisive, and you know that, you can't pretend like you didn't say it, because you've got a platform, right? You have a lens to speak. And that I recognize that there is a very steep uphill battle to get good at that. There's no like media training nowadays for when you have a platform, right? You have 50,000 followers, 90,000 followers, and you automatically get trained on how to share your opinion or how to make sense of what you think or process. So I know it's a steep climb because all of a sudden you're in an earshot of somebody that takes a snippet and it's done. And simultaneously, if we silence that, if we regularly squash new opinions or leaders that aren't quite polished yet, or maybe they slip, and we just immediately discard them, cancel culture, I think we miss a tremendous opportunity to nurture leadership and to make leadership about the combination of both responsibility and opinions.
Wouldn't you, and I wrote it down because it struck me that because I'm essentially reducing you to a soundbite, and think about, we talked about Charlie Kirk last week. I don't know a whole lot about him. Soundbites, I probably wouldn't agree with him on a lot of things, but I also know that there's a larger context of this person's life. And if I am reducing someone to a soundbite, I'm also like, I'm taking away their humanity. I'm taking away my humanity. Because now I've made full judgment on this person based on a 30-second clip, based on a soundbite.
Yeah, it could potentially dismantle Kimmel's career. I mean, he's evolved through his career, so I'm sure he'll land on his feet. But the challenge again is this is a macro example of a micro problem. I think we're back to the same core principle, just with more context of last week, being that if you stay silent, there's a cost to that. And if you get loud, there's a cost to that. And right now, the cost of staying silent is so low compared to the cost of being loud and being progressive or different or opinionated that it's so risky. And when it's that dramatic of a cliff, why the hell would you speak?
Right. And yet it's the people that seem to be screaming that consume so much of the space, or speaking the loudest, I should say, who end up consuming the space. And this is my experience, is when that happens, there's a vacuum that exists because there isn't a leader. When there isn't a leader, the loudest people always take over. They just do. Because they will say whatever they want to say. And I think that's part of what I see happening as well. And part of something I'll write about myself is the loudest voice seems to be winning at the moment, while silencing others at the same time.
Yeah. I believe that one of the harder components of this is leadership and listening. That my opinion and my stance, as powerful and mighty as it might be, or I might think that it is, doesn't inherently give me the right to close off interpreting, understanding, and listening. And in this discord, if we're pronouncing a leader as someone with an opinion, courageous and brave enough to stand on it and fight for it, we also have to add in the responsibility to listen. We have to give them a platform and allow them the chance to speak and the chance to listen simultaneously, and maybe even hold them accountable to listen. You know, I can think of numerous conflicts that I've been in personally, professionally, beyond, where the entitlement of a position is not met with the responsibility of listening. So if you and I disagree on something, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Where there becomes conflict is, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm not going to hear you out. I don't want to hear you out. Don't tell me anything I don't want to hear. And that's essentially the stance that the government, the FCC, stepped in and said, hey, we don't like what you said, so you can't say it anymore. And as a government, that's a really dangerous proposition.
Yeah, especially for a position of power.
And that it's party affiliated, right? That doesn't help. Like, if it was just government, it'd be bad enough. But now it's like, well, clearly this is coming from one place, right? It's sort of follow the money.
You're a political appointee, which means it could happen in the opposite down the road.
Right. The precedent is this could be a thing that whoever isn't, and dude, we have seen this in every history book for 2 millennia, when a leader can silence opinions that are different, government starts to skew, and all of a sudden you have one lane only. What happens when you dissent? There's consequence. And it spin cycles really fast.
Yeah. I want to go back to the listening piece, because I think the listening piece is what's missing. The right and wrong is or I win, you lose. Any of those binaries, I think, is essentially where we live at the moment, and how important the listening is. And obviously, listening is a big part of our work. We have to listen to what other people are saying without judging them right away, but helping myself to understand, helping them to understand. And I just wonder how listening becomes part of the equation, because it's definitely that is definitely a missing piece to all of it. How that becomes a more central piece.
Well, let's make a very clear line in the sand that is representative of what you and I are helping leaders do. If you are the CEO, if you are a business owner and you are building a team, creating an enterprise, working with clients and adding value to the world, and your vision of what you want is less and less responsibility and more freedom, you are chasing entitlement. And that is a recipe for a lot of problems in your business, out of your business, with your relationships, in a lot of areas. That recipe looks like, I want to make more. I want a bigger team. I want more people to structure and scaffold a capital improvement and outflow, cash flow from my company. But I don't want to be responsible for them. I don't want to be responsible to them. I want to be able to go golf and say whatever the fuck I want and do whatever I want. I just want entitlement. At least say it.
Would you say in that particular case, essentially, I want slaves, people that who are slaves to what I want, versus a vision is it. And based on what we do, a vision encompasses everyone within that organization. If it doesn't encompass everyone, you essentially want slaves to what you want versus a larger vision.
I mean, I think that's a very pronounced way to say it. And in some ways, right, it's like the engine is lopsided, right?
Which is a lot of corporate life. They might not use that language, but a lot of corporate life is like that.
Well, if you've worked corporate life at all or had a corporate job, you feel that. I definitely felt that. But to add to that, the number of leaders that come and ask for help in building their vision, that want this high freedom, low responsibility life, are essentially asking for the life of a child. Right? This is what a child gets.
That's what it comes down to. We have a bunch of kids running the place.
You don't, like, Emerson gets that. He gets 100% freedom, no responsibility. Like, he breaks something, I gotta buy it, right? Like,
but he starts to learn that there's a consequence to it.
Correct, and that's important for him. And also, I'm not going to make him buy his garbage truck again. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? So he gets high freedom, low responsibility. Whether or not you are completely embedded in every layer of your org chart, that's not what we're talking about. It doesn't need to mean your to-do list is large, but the sense of responsibility to your organization and to the people that you are leading, to the way that you share your opinion or get involved in local politics, help your community, like whatever it is, I would ask most leaders to reconsider that freedom and responsibility are inverses. The more freedom you get, the more responsibility you have. And we've taken freedom in the entrepreneurial space to mean no responsibility. I want to be financially free. I don't want to have to get up and work. I don't want to have to get up and work out.
And the people you work with, if you kind of circle through your clients, what why don't they want the responsibility? What do you find?
I think the logical, it's a flawed logic pattern, but I think the logical circle is, I work really hard so I make more money so I can do whatever I want, and then when I'm away, I just want to be away. And take the vacation, go. That's not the conversation. The conversation isn't about you not having moments with no responsibility. It's that if someone on your team loses their grandparent or loses their kid or has some kind of tragedy happen, that as a leader, you don't get to just be like, well, they can't talk to the CEO. It's fine. Especially in like small to mid-sized business, right? I'm not talking about like somebody at the store in T-Mobile and then the CEO of T-Mobile. But I think even then the organization has a responsibility to say, hey, how do we care for our people? Even if it is thousands and thousands and thousands of people. But in particularly small and mid-sized where we are, the disconnection, the stratification of a business is much smaller. There's not thousands of people. There's hundreds at most. And what I sense is happening is we've made this idea of financial freedom responsibility free. And freedom, in my opinion, and in every sense of what I understand it to be, is actually a deep commitment to something. I'm not free because I have no commitments. I'm free because I can choose my commitments. And if I choose nothing,
that's the choice piece there.
Correct. If I choose nothing, I'm equally as condemned as if I choose everything or I have no choice. So I'm in limbo either way. And I think there are three phases to freedom. There's I'm running from something, the freedom against something, right? Freedom from, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be like my parents. I don't want to live where I grew up. I'm running away. That freedom from something is usually what gets lift for CEOs. Then then you got to go through this weird middle phase of limbo where you're either still or you're stuck, but you have to figure out the next phase. So you get out from your circumstance and you finally have options. And then you get to the third phase of freedom, which is freedom towards, freedom to commit to something, freedom to choose something. And if you have all the financial resources to do whatever you want, you are not free because you can not work today. You become free when you say, I care about this cause. I care about this opportunity. I care about this person, and I'm going to lean in and double down. And when you make freedom about choice, what starts to happen is things change. When you make freedom about avoidance, nothing changes.
Do you find that this is fascinating, it's been my thought pattern anyway. Do you find that so until I get to the place where I have that freedom, what do they do? How do they describe what they're doing? It's just like almost an obligation. It's almost a drudgery until I can finally get freedom, and then I will be free of responsibility. Essentially, is what I hear you saying. But what is it prior to that in the process leading up to freedom? What do they consider responsibility at that point?
Well, responsibility in the sense of small to mid-sized companies is a task list, right? I have all these responsibilities. I have all these, I would describe the way that most people think of responsibility as, like a workload, right? My workload is too high. And when you separate these two things out and you say, okay, responsibility is A and workload is B, you can have high responsibility and low workload. This is what visionaries are. High responsibility, low workload. I don't know enough about Kirk's business. I don't know enough about Kimmel's business, but I would bet that both of them had high responsibility, low workload. I think of people like Richard Branson and Elon Musk, high responsibility, low workload. And when you finally decouple these things, you can assess them a bit better for what matters to you. Hey, if I gave you more freedom, more things that you could choose from, what would you choose? Well, I want a great life. I want to make a dent in the world. I want to help people. I want to help kids. I want to write books. Okay. Well, then you also, if you're going to do all that shit, you got to have high responsibility. That doesn't mean that you have to have an exhaustive workload and put in 90 hours a week, right? Here's another example. President, right? Ideally done correctly, high responsibility, probably a way above average workload, but you can't have the president, like licking envelopes, like, or delivering mail, right? You structure this, you build a team around this person.
Who does that anymore?
I don't even know where that came from.
I want to make this point because as I'm listening to you speak, there's a macro level to it. The macro, essentially what you are describing is retirement for most people.
Right.
Now I'm
Right.
finally free of that
Right.
responsibility.
Correct.
That's what it's become.
Yep. And in retirement, you don't have leadership, right? You are retired as a leader. Like, no, we don't want your opinion. You're retired, right? And that's an overstatement because there are a lot of people that are quote unquote retired that I think we should lean on our elders and get opinions and those things. But if you are retiring from the leadership position, you don't lead anymore. That's why your responsibility goes down.
More than likely, if you were a good leader, a healthy leader, you're still leading just in a different way at that point.
Yep. And you can
Because
leave on your exit.
you've learned to embody, this is
Yeah.
who I am.
Yeah. And dude, Steve Jobs isn't even alive. And much of his leadership is still in Apple. Right. I think that's a good example of how good leadership can transmute a lifespan and a person, in a lot of ways. And underneath this exterior, this conversation of freedom and responsibility to this extent of what we're talking about, FCC and Kimmel and all that. It is important to hold Kimmel accountable to what he said. It is important to let that run its course, though, right? If you break this chain of freedom and responsibility by just inserting yourself and saying, "Hey, no, there isn't responsibility," or "We're going to take over responsibility," then you break, in my opinion, a very natural law that is critical in a public sphere like leadership.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to describe it. You're essentially short circuiting the process.
The feedback loop, right?
It's but I mean, that just kind of takes it one step deeper. That's the react. Which if you're constantly reacting, you're not leading anyway. But it kind of feeds into that. I'm always short circuiting because I'm reacting to everything.
This edge of responsibility is something I find to be really catalytic for leaders. Because if you aspire to make a dent and make an impact, which that to me is an indicator of a leader, right? I want to make things better. That doesn't mean you're always going to. I've made a lot of things worse that I've tried to make better, but I intended to make them better. If that is intent, if that is the intent, and you've got somebody willing to take responsibility, the opportunity exists to let the situation play out and let the leader forge their way through it. You just have to go through the burn sometimes.
Is it like an avoidance of pain at that? Trying to get rid of the pain.
Well, this FCC thing is exactly that. We don't want the backlash of this, so just kill it.
Just get rid of it.
And polarity is existing in everywhere right now.
That was essentially Charlie Kirk as well. I don't like it, so I'll get rid of it. Get rid of. I mean, I have said this before. Because of my background, because now I have years of life that I have lived. But I remember after 9/11, that was the message, that we have to eradicate evil. And we've just kind of broadened what evil is. From a theological perspective, it is impossible. This is what I had said earlier. If your approach is to eradicate something, you will become that. You will essentially eradicate yourself at that point. And I in many ways, I still reflect back to that moment of 9/11 when that kind of got ingrained in us. And I think it's just escalated since then. How do I get rid of what I don't like or I perceived as wrong or bad or evil?
Right. Yeah. We don't like that you hurt our people, so we're going to genocide your
correct. Correct. Because a group of people have genocided your people, we're going to eradicate all of you. We aggregate the whole thing. Yep.
Yeah, I get all of that, and this situation with Kirk and Kimmel really, it forces me to reflect a little bit on, not a little bit. It forces me to reflect a lot on what am I not saying that needs to be shared. I mean, these episodes are certainly that. What am I afraid of as far as backlash? What kind of pride do I have in my own opinions? And have I thought through my own opinions enough to feel stern and to feel solid about them, right? To present them as thought out, considered, and caring in the way that I'm transcribing them. And, that is a really hard thing to do. It's a really uncomfortable thing to do, to really look at your own opinions and assess them, because we're indoctrinated into so many. You can look at families and cultures and mastermind groups, like all these places is where it happens. And if I think about leadership the way that I've always been taught, that model, I will tell you, was outdated 15 years ago, right? The way I was taught leadership. Leadership was like, be the captain on a soccer team. Like, that shit doesn't work at this level. If I think about leadership just from my experience of working with leaders and a ton of people that are interested in growth, then this challenge with Kimmel comes front and center. You cannot interrupt the freedom, responsibility chain that comes with leadership, because then you break the desire for more leaders. I don't want to be a leader if that thing is broken. And when you start to stagger it, then we get these childish desires of like, well, I just want freedom, but I don't want to be a leader. And I'm not saying everyone's got to be a Kirk or everyone's got to have an opinion about politics, but you can be a leader if free, right? Free. Well, I don't want to talk to my family. I don't want to talk to my friends. I don't want any kind of debt. I don't want anyone to be able to tell me where to be. Like, that is a hollow life to me, where you have no purpose, you have no objective, you have no mission. All you're after is more freedom to do what? To go smoke cigarettes and drink beer all day on the beach? Again, that feels like a tremendous cop-out and a childish desire.
It's Peter Pan.
Exactly. It is 100% Peter Pan. I'm never going to grow up. I'm never going to fight for my belief.
Literally in the psychological world, it's called Peter Pan syndrome.
Dude, and this happens in the dating world. If you meet any woman over 30, she's going to reference that probably 90% of men her age and above are Peter Pans. Same thing. And again, this doesn't have to mean you go fight for politics.
It shouldn't surprise us that on this macro level that it exists, because it exists on the micro level.
It exists everywhere. Maybe that means that your responsibility is you use your intellect to solve a problem. You, instead of sitting on the beach 19 hours a day and getting ripped and tanned, instead you are writing, you're reading, you're contributing, you're answering questions. You could help your neighbor that isn't financially free figure out investing, or talk to a group of middle school kids. Like, it can be so weightless, right? It's not workload. It can be weightless. Still, there's a sense of responsibility. And I really want to start calling out this like bullshit sense of leadership where it's just, I just want everything convenient. I want everything to be so convenient. I want to do what I've always done. I want it to be incredibly convenient. I don't want to work on vision or moving. I just want to stay here in my little bubble and not have to do anything hard.
And I don't care how it impacts anyone else.
Right. Move around my bubble.
Yes.
Please.
Yeah. It's a very, well, we know narcissism all too well. It is very much a narcissistic approach.
Correct. Yeah. The delusion of the bubble, right? The world operates around me to serve me, to make sure that I get what I want. The rules apply to me when they are benefiting me. The rules don't apply to me when they don't. And I'd love to be so free that I have no responsibility. I just want the good parts. And man, that shit burns me up, especially with really capable men who are man, what they could do with such little lift. I had a conversation with a guy worth shitloads of money. And I'm like, why don't you help more? Why don't you do more? Why don't you create more? He's like, oh, well, I'm growing. I'm like, dude, you could spin off what is equivalent to a penny to someone, right? Fund a brave nonprofit guy. Like, even if it's just the dollars, take some responsibility for adding and not just extracting. And man, put 5,000, if you're worth $600 million, put $5,000 into an engineering student in the hood. Put $10,000 into a nonprofit in your neighborhood. Put somewhere, right? do something. And it's this dude, it's the Spider-Man comment, right? With great power comes great responsibility. With great freedom comes great responsibility.
Well, the other way I think of it, and I know many you would agree with it, the leadership for me is about servant leadership, and that's an element that is missing. But that comes with the responsibility piece is
Right.
servant leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of servant leadership. And let's not over structure that. That doesn't mean that you like are digging people out of their personal holes or like rescuing people. It just is a perspective of I have the freedoms that many don't, and I would like to steward other people in their own pursuit of freedom, right? Not I get my freedom at your expense. I get my freedom in totality because we go together.
Yeah. I'll use the responsibility piece. I recognize that I might not necessarily be responsible in some ways to you, but I am responsible in this shared humanity that we're all a part of.
Well said. Look, I hope you enjoyed this passionate dissection of what's going on with Kimmel and Kirk. It, in a sense, is not about either of them. They are representative of catalysts that now we're assessing the larger situation in macro and in micro. I hope that leadership for you demands both boldness and care, the willingness to step up and share your opinion and stand for what you believe in. Even if I disagree with it, I hope you still stand for that. And also that you take some responsibility for what you're creating, the freedom that you have, and the leadership that you're capable of bringing to many others. And the idea of vision is about both of those things. Hey, here's the freedom that I want, and here's the responsibility that I'm willing to take on to get there. And that is a powerful idea. I hope that it inspires you to take on more responsibility, not less, not to add to your workload, because I know you're already busy, but I hope that inspires you to really think differently.
Yeah, I would add one thought. Responsibility is closer to freedom than it is burden.
Nice.
Because I think it's often associated with burden, but it's much closer to freedom.
Well said. If you liked this episode, jump into the comments. We'd love to hear what inspired you, maybe what one line stands out to you or concept, what framework. This is a big topic really about our ability to lead each other collectively here in the States and just as entrepreneurs, I think, even beyond the identity of politics. I hope that you will take time to write a review or leave us 5 stars on Spotify or Apple if you're listening there. That would mean a lot to us. And that you continue to follow along or suggest topics that you want to hear opinions on or hear dissected, debated, and developed. The idea of vision is not just for convenience. It's really about creating a direction for your life, creating a direction for your business, your enterprise, and then using that vision as a roadmap, as a criteria for how you make choices. And that takes responsibility. So might be time for you to step up, might be time for you and I to have a conversation if you're ready to really level up your vision and your business and take on some additional responsibility while also reducing your workload. We can help with both of those. If you want to check out our work, go to livingvision.com. Otherwise, I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for being here.